A number of you have been asking about some sort of a video to guide you through the process of starting a server and connecting to online multiplayer, that sort of thing. So this video should cover most of what you need to know. On the screen here you see 3 files. Let's start with this file here. This is what you can download from the official forums. I'm going to include a link to this. This is basically the zip file with everything you need. And when you unload that zip file, you can unload it to the desktop. It doesn't have to be in your Terraria directory on your computer or anything like that. It can be on your desktop. What you have is the localization folder and then this executable. And this is really all you need to worry about. And look what happens when you click it. It does this, and it's really straightforward. It's basically like an old MS-DOS prompt. And when I first loaded this, that number 1, the 1 NRLP server test, wasn't there. I only had option N and option D. In fact, I don't even think I had option D because I didn't even have world 1. Basically, you can create a world, and I'll do that right now just to show you how easy it is. And I have a pretty good computer, but it's super fast. You can choose the size of the world. I'll go small just to save some time. And then let's go normal difficulty. And world name, guide video server. How original. And once you put those inputs in, all it does for you is creates a world like it does in-game, except obviously I don't have Terraria open right now. It's just doing it for me through this kind of command window. And that's one kind of disappointment about this whole thing, is that it doesn't give you any kind of view into the server. It would be nice if there was some kind of spectator mode that would load up, but as far as I know anyway, that's just not an option. You really need a separate Terraria client to be able to go in and look at the server. Anyway, the world has been created, and so now my prompt has 2 worlds, and since we just created that world 1 there, let's go ahead and choose that. And you can have up to 8 players. They have said in the future they may expand that. Let's just say 8. The default server port, you can hit enter and it'll just be defaulted to 7777. Automatically forward port, yes. Server password, let's just type in a password, whatever. Alright, and that's all you really need to do. At this point, there should be a password protected server out there. The one thing to keep in mind before you go forward is that you may be unable to connect to this particular server if you don't have your router set up correctly. And I'm going to show you on the screen the typical addresses you need to punch into your web browser to get to your router's login page. And every router has a slightly different setup, but the long and short of it is you need to make sure that you've enabled port forwarding. I'll include a link to that particular guide in the video description, but if you're having any trouble connecting, be sure to go through that process and allow port forwarding. And the default port is of course 7777. Anyway, let's see what you can do with this server, and then in just a minute we'll go and try to connect. So if you type help, those are all the server commands, and you kind of are like Homer Simpson at the controls of the power plant here. You have some authority, I guess. You can do things like, oh, I don't know, set a message of the day. And so if I say, hello YouTube, that's the new message of the day. If I want to say, hello NRLP, if I was logged in, that message would show up in the game prompt, or in the game client for the player. And this will make more sense if you actually see it in action. But you can see there are some other options here for changing the time. So if I type noon, then it's going to be noon in the game. If I type dawn, it's now dawn in the game. And so you have sort of like godlike powers. You can kick players, you can ban players, you can exit without saving. It's all there. You've seen the commands. They're pretty self-evident. So let's see if we can connect to this particular server, and I'll show you what it looks like from your mobile client. So with the server active, I'm going to load up my Terraria client and see what it looks like on my end. So I go to multiplayer, obviously, and I just select a character. We'll go with this guy. And immediately this will show up on local hosts. And so as you can see, the name I wrote in is exactly the name that shows up here. And no great surprises there. It's a normal small world, up to 8 players, exactly what I had punched in. But what about online? Because that's probably what most of you are concerned about. And this might be a little disconcerting. If you've played other games, you might be used to, say, a long list of servers just automatically populating that you can filter and that sort of thing. That's not how it's done in Terraria. You actually have to add, and to add a server, you actually need to know the IP address, and so whoever is hosting the server is going to have to divulge that to you, at least the first time around. When you come back to the multiplayer online in the future, servers you've been on before should be on the list, and you should have the option to just keep them on there every time you load up. But the first time around, certainly, you're not going to see anything. And so here, you need to punch in the IP address, and that's obviously a critical piece of information, as is the password. So what's the IP address? If you want to host a server, you're going to need to know that. Well, there's a pretty easy way to do that, and it's shown here. And I'll include that link in the video description. And so the long and short of it is, get your IP address from that method, share that, share the password if you have a password protected server with anyone you want to join. And also be sure to allow port forwarding so that people can connect from the internet. Otherwise, it's local only, I'm afraid. And so with all that in mind, you should be able to join. So I'll show you in just a second what it looks like to join such a server. Alright, and I'm on the server. And so just run around. It's performing rather well for me right here. And I don't really know what else to say other than to point out, if you're not familiar with the Terraria 1.3 mobile multiplayer, the little tooltips for the controls, the toggle button for that has been replaced with this little chat window you see in the upper right. And if you were to click on that, that allows you to write messages. And so you can say, at the dungeon. And that way you can communicate with all other players on the server. But, you know, a lot of this stuff is pretty obvious. I think many of you probably just wanted to see this in action, how to set up the server and that sort of thing. And there's really not too much to it. I think some of the port forwarding issues are probably going to be what's plaguing many of you. So you're going to need to know how to log into your router and make that happen. This really isn't a resource to really dive deep into all of those issues and technical issues depending on what router you have. I just really wanted to go over the basics for those who might have been a little bit intimidated with the whole process. But what if you wanted to host from your mobile device, which is obviously not recommended, it's not ideal, but what if you want to do that? Well, you actually do it through the game. There's a host button here on the local connection. I don't see one on the online. As far as I know, this is the way to do it. Host here, pick your map, let's say test, play, set the number of max players. I'm not going to use a password. And it's just like so. It's a lot easier, I think, than the other method, but again, I would suspect that if you want to play online, you're going to need to do the port forwarding thing with your router administrative setup. So just bear that in mind. But as you can see, the features are pretty similar. There's less control over it, I would say, than with the PC-based server. There's not that kind of God menu, for lack of a better term, but evidently you can host this way as well. Again, I would stress that you probably, if you have a PC, would be better served by hosting from the PC, but just so you know, this is another option. So thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate you swinging by. I hope this was helpful. Again, it's not really diving too deep into the entire process. It was really just to show you, if you have a PC, how you can get this up and running. They have said that really a dedicated PC with a stable connection rather than a Wi-Fi device is the way to go. And I think that's probably right, given the demands of the game and the need to have a stable, consistent connection to a server. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and I will see you all next time.